This is a story of a time when my parents were very angry with me. This started back in 1999, I believe. It was September. I remember this because GDA, our school, was going to open its new semester the next day. Now, this was very special because the students and the faculty and everybody here were just starting. The school was brand new then, and it was glorious. It was beautiful. All of the buildings looked great. Everything was new and shiny. Everybody was very happy to come to one of Taiwan's newest universities. So what happened was we went to bed early the night before because the next day was going to be the first day of class. So I remember quite clearly that night laying down to bed, and we wanted to go get sleep. Next day, work, good day. Then, because I remember my wife and my daughter and myself laying in bed. And so we go to sleep. And at some point in the middle of the night, I feel a little, and I kind of wake up and I look down because I think it's my daughter kicking and rolling around in bed, but she's asleep. I look over at my wife, and my wife is awake too. And before we could talk or say anything to one another, we could hear the air around us going, whoa, 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 whoa. And then we could feel it. Now, you know, all of us have been in earthquakes before, and they kind of go side to side. This one was big. This one felt different because we went up and down. Instead of going side to side, the earth actually was going up and down. Now, I realize now that's because we were in the middle of the earthquake. But at the time, you don't think about it. It's just like, oh, this is a weird one. Okay. So before we could really decide what to do about the earthquake, things started really moving. And I remember now the training that we get when we're children in America is they teach you, if there's an earthquake, go under a table or stand in a doorway so that you're safe from falling things, right? Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. We did none of that. We just lost it. And we grabbed the daughter and we just started running out of the house as fast as we could. Now we got out to the house and I remember getting just outside the front door. By then it was going up and down so much that we couldn't stand. So I had to hold my daughter like this, like a football on the ground. And you could hear everything just crashing. The lights flickered and then went out. Everything started crashing and breaking. And we were looking into the dark just with all of this noise surrounding us. And the next noise we heard was our neighbor breaking his window because it turned out after he explained it to us, he couldn't get out of his house. What had happened is the house had tilted and the door had gotten stuck so that he couldn't leave. So he had to break the window and crawl out the window because the door couldn't go out. So he's standing there in his underwear, and we're just waiting for things to kind of settle down. And eventually, the rest of the neighborhood came out too. So we didn't know what was going on, and we sat inside a car, and we listened to a radio station in Taichung. They didn't know either. They said, wow, that was a big earthquake, huh? So I think, okay, well, we'll figure out what that was tomorrow. We didn't think the earthquake was here. We didn't know. So I wasn't thinking about that too much. Instead, we went back into the house and slept. Now, that's probably a bad idea. Looking back years from now, I shouldn't have done that. We should have stayed outside. Okay, mistake on my part, but it ended up being kind of okay. However, the next morning when I woke up, I remember looking around our house, and the house was still okay. It was a very small house, and it was only one story. It was out in the country. So I go into the kitchen and the living room area were all one room. And what had happened is the wall had broken away. And you could see through the wall into the fields outside. And so the wall was still holding the house up, but it kind of had moved. And I remember very clearly, we had a television on one side of the house and the refrigerator was on the other side of the room. And somehow during the night, the refrigerator door had moved over here and the television had moved over here. So at some point they had crossed and passed each other in the earthquake. So the refrigerator was wide open, the door was on the floor, there's no power, but it's daylight, so okay. I decide, oh, this is not a good one. So I get on my motorcycle and we look around and buildings were tipped over and things were really awful. We underestimated how bad the earthquake was. So we realized, okay, no school. There was no school. They canceled that. They moved all of the students up to Taida for a semester. And this, though, while it was tragic and it was a very bad time for some people, we were fortunate. A lot of people were okay. But what was really special about it was this was the time that I really loved Taiwan, I could say. This is when I really realized that Taiwan is kind of a special place because there was no looting, there was no stealing. Everybody worked together. People came together. Everyone helped. We shared water. We shared food. Everyone was very, very friendly. So even though it was a bad time, it was also sort of a good time too, because people felt like we were lucky somehow. Now, we didn't think about it too much because we were all outside kind of okay. We were just glad that everything worked out. After about 4 days, we got telephone lines started working again. Now, you got to remember, this was a long time ago. Not everyone had cell phones. We didn't have anything like that. We had to use the wired phone lines. So after 4 days, I am able to call home. Now, I knew that the earthquake was a big thing in Taiwan, but I didn't realize that it was being shown all over the world because we had no TV. We didn't know. What had happened was, during that time, my parents were watching the earthquake in Taiwan. I didn't think they even knew at all, but they had been watching day after day after day of news of the coverage of the major earthquake in Taiwan and people being pulled out of buildings. And of course, they're getting very, very nervous. Now, my parents had never visited us in Taiwan at that time, but my younger brother had. And my brother, I love my brother. He's a great kid. He's younger than me, but he's quite a bit taller. And some would say more handsome. And they said, "Hey, Rob, come here." And my brother shambles in, and he was looking at them like, "What?" "Look, there is an earthquake in Taiwan." He's like, oh yeah, okay. "Where?" "And it's in the middle. Isn't that where Les and Aggie live?" That's my wife's name. And he said, "Oh, yeah." He's looking at the TV. "They're probably dead. That's it." And so he thinks he was being funny, which, to give him credit, to be fair, yeah, I would have done exactly the same thing. But it kind of backfired on him after like 3-4 days, and they didn't hear anything from anybody too. So by the time I had called, they had been really, really nervous. And so when I got on the phone and my mom picked it up, and I said, "Hey, Mom, it's Les." She said, "Oh, God, thank God. Oh, thank God you're alive." So she was really, really crying and could barely speak. And I could hear her, though. I remember my father in the background saying, "Gloria, give me the phone. Gloria, give me the phone." No, I'm not going to yell. Now, some kind of parents, they will kind of be quiet, and they'll be like, "Come here. No, I want to talk to you. Come here. No, it's okay. And then they yell at you. Yeah, my dad was that guy, okay? So he was waiting. He gets on the phone. I'm listening like, oh boy, here we go. And he just starts going at me. Now, he's starting to yell at me, but the way that he yelled was quite funny because I remember he was like, "I can't believe that you would put my granddaughter in that kind of situation." Now, notice he didn't ask, "Are you okay? Is everybody else okay? How's Aggie? Everybody good? Okay?" No. He only wanted to know about the granddaughter because he loves our daughter. He thinks she is just wonderful. So he was worried about her. Now, years later, of course, I know he's not really angry. He was scared, but he didn't quite know how to show it. So he did his dad way of, yelling, but he was nervous. And of course, he was worried about us, but he really loves my daughter. So he wanted to make sure that she was okay. The worst part was as he is yelling at me, we get an aftershock. Now, if you don't know, aftershock are just some smaller earthquakes after you have a big one. There are like many, many small ones after that. So as I'm talking to him, I'm like, "Oh, Dad, hold on. We got another aftershock coming here." And he's like, "Ah!" So now he is yelling at me in real time. But this time, my father is Canadian. And he grew up with French-speaking people too. So not only does he swear and say bad words at me in English, he flips to French, which, if you don't know, people who yell and say swear words, I think, my personal opinion, the two best countries in the world to get sworn at are Taiwan and in French. Now, Taiwanese, what a good language to be sworn in. It sounds great. People yelling at you, feels so right to be yelling in bad words in Taiwanese. Then French also, nice and smooth and very together. And the way that they swear, the words that they put together are particularly nasty too. So they will say things about your mother that you shouldn't ever want to hear. But anyway, he's yelling at me. And so I said, okay, Dad, it's fine. We tried to calm him down. So after that, after everything had calmed down, I called him every week to kind of check in, but he would just yell at me. He just swore at me every single week to come back to America. And what happened is eventually we did. I moved back and my wife and daughter joined me, and we lived in America for about, I think, 4 or 5 years after that. And what happened was, well, after that amount of time, we wanted our daughter to be bilingual. It was very important to us that she know both cultures. So we moved back here and had her go through school here as well. So now she's totally fluent in 2 languages. And we have a son who also does this too. But he was born here too. Okay? So that is a time when my parents were very angry at me. Thanks.